What is going on, everybody? We are back for another episode of the Home Advantage Interview Wrestling Podcast, live streaming again today with Dustin Myers, the owner of the Old School Gym in Ohio, also the strength and conditioning coach at the Ohio Regional Training Center. Dustin, how's it going today?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm pumped for this interview. We've been trying to set it up for a while. I'm sorry about all the difficulties we've had, but I'm excited to get going with it.
I'm excited too, man. I mean, I know how it is. I'm busy. You're busy. I mean, journalist of the year. You got a lot of people pulling you in different directions. So I know how that stuff goes, man. I'm just happy to have me on today for sure.
All right. So with this time of like quarantine and everything, what's been your daily routine? What have you been able to do with the Old School Gym? What's a day in the life like for Dustin Myers in this time?
Well, luckily we actually just reopened 2 days ago, so that's been really good to kind of get back to a little bit of a sense of normalcy. But for the past, whatever it's been, 2.5 months, it's kind of hard to keep track now, right? The days start to run together a little bit. During that time, I mean, technically I could still go into the gym and train if I wanted to. And at first I almost did that. I was like, well, it's my gym. I can still go in and lift and do my normal thing, even though we're not open for business. But then the more I thought about it, I said, you know what, like a big part of, my job and really just my driving purpose every day is to try to help people, try to motivate them, try to give them content and, ideas to do in their training. And I thought, if I'm going into the gym just because I'm like, because I have access to it, then in a way that's kind of being selfish, because then how am I able to motivate others to do stuff on their own and to work out at home and try to make do without the equipment and the environment and everything that they're used to. So once I really thought about it, I said, you know what, I'm going to just approach it like, hey, we're all in this together. Even though I own a gym, I'm going to work out of my house. I got, plenty of stuff to do here. I got some dumbbells and I got, my heavy bag in the basement, and I got a, pull-up bar and dip bar that I built in the backyard probably 10 years ago. So, on a normal day, I'd, wake up and, get a run in or, get on the Echo bike, kind of get a good conditioning bar. I like to do that kind of first thing in the morning. And then I've been doing like a live stream with my high school athletes from the Old School Gym. So we've been doing like a live stream at 9 o'clock every day, kind of, work out in the basement or whatever. We'll do some, some body weight stuff and some weights and things like that. And then after that, by the time we're done with that, I have breakfast and cook pancakes for my kids and then just kind of get to work. It's just, working in a different environment at home versus, being at the gym or down at the RTC.
Yeah, for sure. So recently you got involved with Flow Wrestling. You started putting some content up there. What went into the decision of that, and what do you plan to do in the future with Flow?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm, pumped to be involved with those guys. I've known them for a long time, and obviously they're kind of the, they're the standard in the wrestling community. I mean, I know there's other platforms out there and stuff, but Flow in my mind is like the ESPN of the wrestling world. They're kind of the originators of it, and as far as on the content side. So I've known those guys for a while, just from them coming down to Ohio State or the RTC. They would come down to interview guys or whatever. So yeah, I was familiar with Bader and CP and them, and maybe 3 or 4 years ago they came down. I remember I was kind of hollering at Bader. I was like, hey man, we should do some content. I should do some strength training content for you guys. And they were like, yeah, maybe, blah, blah, blah. And they just kind of blew it off. And then I think what happened was, and again, this was, 3 or 4 years ago, I think NATO came out to the gym one time and we were doing some sleds and I was like pushing the sled with Nate on it. And I don't know if you remember, but there was a time where Flow was measuring everything in NATOs. Like that's one NATO if it's 125 pounds.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, you remember that whole thing. So, but I remember CP commented on the video and said, oh, only pulling one NATO, that's weak. So the next week down at the RTC, I said, all right, we're going to show CP. So I loaded up a sled with a bunch of weight and put Tervel Delagnev, our heavyweight Olympian, sled, and I put NATO. What's that?
No, I was saying, yep, that's awesome.
Yeah, yep. So I put had some weight. I had Tervel and I had like NATO, I think, on Tervel's shoulders. And I pulled the sled, which I about blew out my Achilles and it felt like, my hands were going to burst or whatever. But we did a little video of that. And, Nate don't say a whole lot. He's a man of few words, but he pointed at the camera and said, this one's for you, CP. So we posted that and yeah, it was so funny. But, anyway, Flow ended up taking that down and like reposting, and they did an article. I think CP called it the amazing strength feats of RTC Coach Myers or whatever. And so then after that, they kind of warmed up to it. And I did some videos with Bader or whatever, and they put them up, but still nothing regular until recently. I just kind of reached out to him. I was like, man, you guys are expanding. You have the podcast, you have everything except for strength training content. Like, look, man, like I already have this content thing down. I've done thousands of videos, you know. I'm sure there's other good strength coaches out there you can find, but you're not going to find one that can, you know, that has had this much experience, not just working with the athletes, but also creating content for them. So it was kind of an easy, you know, thing for us to line up. The timing was right, and, you know, hopefully it'll last for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm excited to see it. To be honest, the stuff that I've seen from your content and stuff for your strength training has come out of your social media. But I spend a lot more time on Flow than I do on social media, and so I've gotten a chance to watch a lot more of your stuff since you've gotten on Flow. So I'm really excited to keep watching that stuff. So throughout your career, I know you kind of wrestled. What was it? 2 years in high school. That was your experience in high school.
Yeah, so I was a late starter. I kind of I went out for wrestling, I think in 8th grade, and like, you know, hurt my knee a couple months in, and then, you know, for lack of a better term, quit, and was just kind of like, maybe this ain't for me. And two of my best friends growing up though were pretty good. Luke Spencer, one of them, he was a real tough wrestler. He ended up wrestling for the All Army team, wrestled Greco. But anyway, I remember we got to 10th grade. He's like, man, you love to lift weights, you're strong, you like to work out, like you need to come back out for wrestling. So he kind of twisted my arm, and I ended up going, you know, back on wrestling, you know, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I'm really glad that I did. You know, obviously starting that late, it was kind of challenging. I was just kind of a muscle head. You know, I didn't really have the time to learn and, you know, perfect my technique, so to speak. But I would say by the time I was a senior, I started to get a, you know, feel for it a little bit. And I think the big thing that I, you know, took away from wrestling is it really, I mean, I thought I was tough before I wrestled. You know, I like to lift weights, and I'm, you know, a big tough guy, and I'd box a little bit and stuff. But wrestling really hardened me up and toughened me up and kind of turned me into a man more than anything else did, more even so than the weight room, you know? And I think even just wrestling that very short time, it had a huge impact on my mentality and the way I, you know, kind of just view the world. So I'm very, very thankful for the short period of time that I did actually wrestle.
Yeah, for sure. So in your time wrestling, you didn't really have a full career compared to a lot of the people you've worked with and a lot of the people I've had on this show. So since then, have you had as much involvement with the sport, especially in this quarantine time, to maybe watch more wrestling than you normally do or anything like that, to be more involved with the sport?
Well, I would say the biggest thing as far as actual wrestling and not just training for wrestling that I'm doing right now is I'm wrestling with my 8-year-old son in the basement every day. So that's been fun. You know, he wrestled it. He's in first grade, was in first grade this year, and wrestled for the first time in the winter. And, you know, we had plans to join, you know, Steber's Club in the spring, obviously with the pandemic, and that got shut down. You know, we're going to have to wait to join Logan's club. But in the meantime, you know, me and him have been scrapping in the basement every night. And just obviously, you know, he weighs 38 pounds and I'm a grown man, so it's a little bit different, but just kind of helping him get a feel for it and teaching him how to scrap, and for him to kind of really understand how to, like, all right, I'm not just going to grab my dad's neck. I'm going to club him. And, you know, so that's really what I've been doing and I've been trying to kind of, you know, think back about, you know, different guys, different ways they would hit things that I would like. Like I always liked how Dom Demas would try an inside trip, and if he didn't get it, he would kind of go to like Greco headlock. So I've been like teaching him that and just some different things that are maybe a little bit different than other kids that age are learning. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't know you had a kid that was getting started wrestling. How much thought have you given that? Do you want to keep him a little bit more like you were, where a lot of your training, or I guess the majority of your training, was the lifting and strength stuff, or do you want to get him a little bit more involved in the actual sport? How do you plan to go about with him?
Yeah, well, I think it's tricky. I think the big thing is, you know, I mean, obviously with Jack growing up, it's different for him. You know, I didn't grow up in a wrestling family. I had buddies that wrestled, but, you know, my dad didn't wrestle. You know, we weren't really immersed in the sport. Whereas with Jack, I mean, he's grown up around the Ohio State guys. I mean, in the summertime, they come out to my house and work out. They're at the gym. We're always, you know, we used to be down at Steelwood all the time. We go to the matches. So since he was able to walk, he's been around, you know, NATO and Logan and the Jordans and all these guys. You know, he loves Colin Moore and Keyshawn Hayes and these guys. They're like his buddies. So I think it's a little bit different for him. But, even once he turned 5, people were saying, when's your son going to wrestle? I'm like, I mean, whenever he wants to, I'm not going to be one of those dads that tries to push him into the sport. But this past winter, he told me he wanted to try it, and we tried it. I think, he had a good experience with it, and he loved it. And the biggest thing for me is that I don't have any designs on like, all right, I'm going to, grind my kid into the ground so he's the best. It's, hey, we work out every day, but we do it because he enjoys doing it. And we've been doing it for so long now. And with, the wrestling side of it, it's like I told my wife, because she sees how much he likes it now, and she kind of worries I'm going to turn into one of those crazy wrestling dads. I say, hey, if next year in 2nd grade he doesn't want to wrestle, or in 7th grade, or even when he gets to high school and he just says, Dad, I don't like wrestling anymore, I'll say, okay, then you don't have to do it. I think the worst thing you can do as a parent is try to force, your desires and your desire for a kid to compete in something onto them when they don't love it, especially in a sport that's as taxing and challenging as wrestling.
Absolutely. It really does take a true love for yourself for the sport. I'm actually working on an article right now for Flow about getting your kids to love wrestling, which I think is kind of funny because I don't have experience in that. As soon as I got on the mats, I loved it immediately, and so I've never really faced any problems with that. But at the same time, I do think it's fun to talk about that. It's a passion of mine, and so it is really cool to hear your perspective on that.
So when you started, how old were you, Sam?
I was 6.
And it was like right away you knew this was your thing, right?
Right away, yeah.
I love it.
It was,
I think,
yeah.
I think some kids are definitely predisposed to it. I think, maybe if you're more of an aggressive kid or you enjoy the contact of it, that's why I was even, when Jack said he wanted to wrestle, I was thinking, man, like, I don't know. He's not a very aggressive kid. He's real, I don't want to say that other wrestlers aren't nice or kids that wrestle aren't nice, but to me, he didn't seem like he had that hard edge to him, and I didn't either when I was that young. I didn't really develop until I was older. So in my head, I was thinking, oh, this might be too soon. But it was weird. It really changed once he went out there. You might have been one of those kids that already like from the jump was like, I'm ready to scrap. I'm ready to do this, huh?
I wasn't really, I loved like the fun of it. I thought it was so cool. I loved all sports that I did. I played football starting when I was 4. And so I have 6 siblings. And so activities, sports, stuff like that was all I knew from the get-go. And
it was the culture in your household.
Yeah. And so it was just another sport. And this one, as I matured too, I learned a little bit more about what the sport was, and my passion grew as I matured.
Well, I think that's a testament to your parents and also a testament to the coaches that you had early on, because it's very easy for a kid like yourself that is athletic and is used to competing and stuff that then gets into it and maybe shows a little bit of promise and they burn them out real quick, So I think, give your parents a pat on the back and also your early coaches a pat on the back for that one.
For sure. I always I'm really grateful to them. I just think it's so cool. It's a sport that's taught me so much. And I mean, look at this. I'm getting to talk to guys like you and Jordan Burroughs and stuff like that through this, and learn so much about life and wrestling itself. If I didn't get here, I would be missing out on so much.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I'm I was going to kind of wait till the end to talk about this, but I'm number one, and I'm sure you hear this from a lot of people come on. I'm really impressed with what you've done, and I think it's a real testament to the idea that if you're passionate about something and you have an idea, you should pursue it. We talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and people have this idea in their head that whether it's they want to start a business, they want to start a podcast, whatever it is, they think there's going to be some perfect time where the stars align and everything is in a row. But I think, you're really showing that you don't have to wait till some perfect time. No one says in the podcast, instruction manual, hey, when you're 12 or 13 years old or 14, whatever, just, if you like something, start a podcast on it.
Yeah.
No one told you, hey, it's time for you to do this. You decided it was time to do this. And I think, your commitment and your passion to the sport is really showing, and it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes over the years, because you're just getting started. So
yeah, I'm excited.
I think it's been really cool.
I think it's so cool. My partner Jude Swisher is actually in a month. June 15th is when he can start talking to college coaches for and getting recruited and stuff. And it's really funny because he's already made contacts with these coaches, and and interviewed them before and talked with them. And it's just a perspective and a unique circumstance that most people don't have. And
No
I'm
doubt,
really
man.
excited for the future of it. But let's get back to your career. And
Yeah, yeah.
you kind of talked a little bit about your beginning of the sport, but um, I know I've heard you talk about it before. Your dad coached a football team, is that correct? In high
Yep.
school? He coached a high school football team, and so you kind of got into sports in that way. And you what was it? You started weightlifting with the team with your dad in the garage.
Yeah. So what it was when I was a kid, my dad, coached high school well, at the time it was called Stanton High School, small school. And they, this was in the, you know, early to mid 80s. They didn't have like a strength coach and stuff like that. Things were much different back then, especially in rural, Eastern Ohio. So in the summertime, he had weights in the garage, and the kids that he coached would lift all summer at our house. So when I was, 5, 6, 7 years old, I would be out in the garage every day watching these teenagers, work out with my dad. And, just the camaraderie that's in the weight room, the guys kind of bantering back and forth, busting each other's balls and pushing each other and stuff like that. It was really cool. It really seemed like like this world that I wanted to be a part of. So at first it wasn't even about the weightlifting. It was just like, all right, older kids, they're listening to, at the time it was probably like heavy metal, like Metallica and stuff like that. And, my dad's out there kind of showing them how to work out and stuff. So that was my earliest exposure to it. And then once I turned 12, I started lifting weights. And up to that time, I'd never played any sports. So, my dad, who had, grown up, was a standout athlete, in 3 sports. So it's kind of one of those things where guys would be like, "Oh, Kim, when's your boy going to go out for track? When's your boy going to do this?" Because they kind of thought that I was going to like follow in his footsteps. And he just always said, he said he's not interested in it. And at the time I wasn't. So I started lifting weights when I was 12 and got really into weightlifting. That was kind of my first love. And then, got into wrestling later. And then, as I got a little bit older, like, college, I did some jujitsu, and my late 20s, I boxed competitively and did some bodybuilding. So did a little bit of stuff here and there over the years.
What do you think drew you so much to weightlifting and working out at that young age? Because I don't think, and I think I want to get into this a little bit later, but I don't think that most people find that passion for an exercise like that that early on, especially. So for me, wrestling has so many different areas to it that I can find a passion because I think it's a really fun activity to learn new skills and stuff. Whereas a sport like cross country, you just run forever, and I really don't see like the fun in that like I would in wrestling.
Right.
What do you think you saw in weightlifting and working out with your dad and the football team that gave you such a passion for it?
I mean, I think I was probably just a product of my environment. I just grew up from the early age. I mean, it's some of my earliest memories of watching my dad lift weights. And I think it was just so, not that he ever pushed weightlifting on me, but it was just so much a part of who he was and what he did. He worked in the steel mill, and then he would come home, and then first thing he'd do would lift weights. So before dinner, whatever. And he did that whether it was 90 degrees out in the summer or whether it was, -5 in the wintertime. And the garage was basically like a shed. It's an old detached building.
Yeah.
It wasn't heated or anything. So in my mind, I think kind of my early perception of, what it means to be strong and what it means to be a man is like, hey, you lift weights. That's just something you do. You chop firewood and you lift weights. So I think just from, watching my dad, and like all kids, I grew up, I wanted to be my dad. And I think that was just kind of that was the easiest path that I saw, like to be like him and to spend time with him was lifting weights. And so I think that was probably the biggest thing that kind of, especially early on. But then once I actually started doing it when I was 12, the other motivating factor was, I was kind of a late bloomer maturity wise. I didn't really start growing until I was maybe, 14 years old, 15 years old, around there. So at 12 years old, and really all the way up through grade school, I'd been the smallest kid in my class every year. I was very small. I wasn't very strong because I never really played any sports, So then once you get to, 12 years old, now you're interested in girls and things like that. And you're like, man, I'm the shortest kid in the class. I'm the smallest kid in the class. I want to be big. I want to be strong. I wanted to feel that confidence that comes from it. And I think that was a motivating factor too. And I got really, I've always been kind of an obsessive person when I'm into something, whether it's comic books or lifting weights or cooking or whatever it is. Throughout my life, when I get interested in something, I want to learn everything about it. I want to, find out what the people are, the people that were the best at it, what did they do? How did they approach it? Things like that. So it was kind of a combination of growing up in the culture of it and not wanting to be the smallest, weakest kid in my class anymore.
And you're kind of shooting that for that kind of thing where you surround Jack in that environment of wrestling and stuff to the point where he just feels like it's part of what he does.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways it's kind of unintentional, but I would say, yeah, it is kind of the same thing. The culture in our house is we work out. My kids have worked out with me since they were 4 years old. Even my daughter, she could climb the rope at old school gym when she was 4. And then them just, always being around wrestling. I've been taking them to, dual meets for the Buckeyes forever, and they've known the guys forever. And it's just something that I think the more they're exposed to it without me trying to push them into it, then the more apt he is to really enjoy it and like it, So, I mean, he's been even wanting, on this downtime on quarantine, we've been able to, spend a lot more time together because I'm not going into the gym. So he wants to watch, the Flow documentaries. We watched Mako the other day. He wants to watch old matches of Reese and NATO and these guys that he's known forever. But, like when Reese was competing, Jack was so young, he never watched any of their matches. So he wants to watch those guys now. So it's really cool.
That's awesome. I was talking to John Strittmatter. He coaches at Young Guns Wrestling Club. It's a really successful youth club.
Right.
And I think he's got 3 boys right now around the age of 2, 4, and 6. Mm-hmm. And his 4-year-old just loves wrestling. And other kids will be playing with trucks, he said, and he'll want to watch Spencer Lee matches. But his 6-year-old, he said, isn't all that interested. And I just love hearing him talk about how he wants to involve them differently because one kid he thinks can handle more thrown at him at an earlier age, and the 6-year-old probably needs to wait a little bit. And I just love hearing stuff like that.
Well, I think, obviously he's such a high level coach, and I mean, you look at the list of athletes that have come through his gym, obviously the culture he's built there is something really special. Just to have sons growing up in that culture there, I mean, they'll probably all gravitate towards it. He's probably right in thinking, maybe it's the right time for the youngest. Maybe the middle one needs to wait a little bit longer, something like that. But I'm pretty confident that he'll be able to kind of navigate that path.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch Jack and the Strittmatter kids grow up and watch them wrestle someday. I think it's going to be so cool. But
hey, you never know. Maybe Jack will be coming to your club someday,
Yeah, that'd be crazy to think
right?
About that. Yeah. But back to you. You wrestled 2 years in high school. You started in 8th grade, you said. And you kind of got hurt, didn't really like it that much. But when you came back, were you just a little bit stronger, had more confidence? And what did it look like when you came back?
Well, let's see. I think so 10th, 11th, 12th. So 10th grade, I came out for it. And, I was wrestling, JV or reserves or whatever. And I was killing most of the guys because, they weren't any good. And I was just strong, So then I kind of found a little bit of success, even though it was at the JV level. So I felt like, man, I like this now, And then my junior year, I made the starting lineup, but still now I'm only on really my second year of wrestling. I still didn't really even understand a proper drop step, So then I was in the varsity lineup and I got hammered that year. I mean, I think I won 6 matches, And so it was a kind of a good reality check of like, hey, you can't just go out there and just try to muscle everyone because you're stronger than them. So there would be even, kids that were pretty good in my area that I would go out there and I would do okay against them at first. But, I just didn't really have that feel for it yet. So then I would, maybe it would be a 2-1 match going into the third, but then I would get pinned, So got absolutely hammered that year. But then I just, tried to go to more open mats and tried to realize, all right, maybe I do need to concentrate more on my technique and stuff like that. And things were different back then. There wasn't the amount of clubs and club opportunities and stuff. But, then my senior year, I mean, I think I did okay. I, qualified for the district tournament here in Ohio, which is, goes Ohio sectionals, districts, and state. So made it to the district tournament, had a winning record, won some matches, lost some matches, that type of thing. So it at least I felt the improvement from it. And more so, I think I felt like I kind of started to understand that how important the mindset is of like, well, when it does get tiring and uncomfortable, you have to be willing to keep moving and keep pushing instead of cowering away from that discomfort, which I think was something that took me a little while to learn.
You know what I think is unique and cool about the way you were brought into the sport is a mentality that transfers over from weightlifting. And it's something that normally when wrestlers weightlift, it comes after wrestling. And
Right.
so weightlifting mentality branches off from wrestling mentality. But for you, it was reversed. And so with weightlifting, it's so easy to see the benefits of hard work. So like if I deadlift really hard and I put a lot of effort into deadlifting, I'm going to see my numbers go up, and that's going to be a tangible thing that I can see and watch. In wrestling, it's a lot harder to see that. You can see yourself getting better, doing better against people in practice, but it's not nearly as tangible. And so I think that mentality of hard work reaps benefits so clearly in weightlifting, and I think it transfers over so well to wrestling. I think that's a really cool perspective to have.
Absolutely. I
Oh,
think sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I think that's a good point. And I think that, like you said, a lot of wrestlers, their weightlifting experiences, it's just something they do after practice, or it almost becomes kind of a conditioning modality. Like, all right, we're gonna do a little circuit now to get a pump and wear ourselves out or whatever. But number one, I really try to push for my guys. Like, all right, I don't care what weight class you're in, we got to try to get stronger. We got to maintain our strength in season. We got to try to develop power. But also there's an element to our weightlifting, whether it's our functional stuff we do at the end, or, conditioning that we do with sleds, or our strongman type stuff, where we can put ourselves in a very, uncomfortable position where we can go to deep water, and there's going to be some growth there. We're going to develop some mental toughness that can carry over into wrestling, because not everything, not all gains are tangible. Like you said, on the deadlift, you can see if you go up 10 pounds or if you increase by 20 pounds, but you may not be able to feel that when you're doing, some type of, conditioning circuit, or, pushing a heavy sled, or, carrying, carrying, I don't know the word I'm looking for, like Atlas stones and things like that.
Yeah.
But what you can develop is kind of that sense of like, all right, this hurts really bad. I'm able to push through it. And when I feel the same feeling again, when your mind wants to panic, you understand how to deal with it better. So that way, when that situation arises on the mat, you're able to kind of process it and get through it easier.
Yeah, that's that perspective is so crazy, and I haven't thought about that until just now. Maybe that's something that I think should be pushed more in our sport, is that mentality that comes from weightlifting, which is, it's weird to think that just throwing around weights and lifting stuff and picking weights up gives you such a deep mental state, and make you learn new things to transfer over into life and wrestling. It's just weird. But how much did you like wrestling when you first started it in 8th grade, and then compare that to when you started again back in high school? And why do you think this switch was it confidence? Just walk me through I guess the passion that you had, or that grew, or whatever that may be.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I liked wrestling in high school. I got to where I enjoyed it. And especially by the time I was a senior, I liked that I started to get a feel for it. And I liked the camaraderie and the team and stuff. But I still was, really kind of a weightlifter first, wrestler second. And then, in college, I went to Ohio State, graduated in 2002. And I was kind of loosely a fan of wrestling at that point. We would go to some dual meets every once in a while, and I kind of followed along with the sport a little bit. But I didn't really start, getting into it until once I opened the gym in 2003, after I graduated. And then I'm working primarily as a personal trainer, and I started training like some athletes, kind of locally, high school athletes and stuff. And when I started working with some high school wrestlers, I was kind of like, wait a minute, like I feel like I have a better understanding of the strength demands of their sport and their conditioning demands of the sport, because I've actually done it, So I never played football. So when I train football players, I can understand how to do things by the book, but it was hard for me to really grasp exactly the mindset of a football player, so to speak.
Yeah,
But with wrestlers, it was a little bit different. Even, having some experience in it, when I would train the wrestlers, I felt like I could kind of connect to them, and I understood what it felt like to put your foot on the line and have to, go toe to toe with someone. So I think, that was when I started to grab like a deeper appreciation for it. It was later in life when I started training more high school wrestlers. And then we have at our old gym, I put a wrestling mat in the back, but now we actually have a wrestling room at the gym we've been at now since 2008. So not only would I, I would lift with them. A lot of times I would get in there and wrestle with my high school kids. And I would do hand fighting drills or just stuff that I knew I could do to help kind of toughen them up and make them, kind of more hard edged a little bit. So I think that was when I really started to enjoy the sport a lot more, when I actually started training wrestlers. So I think my real love for it didn't so much come from my limited experience competing in it, but more from coaching the athletes and getting to experience the sport through them and see them win and things like that.
And that's kind of where I wanted to go next was, obviously, what you majored in English in college for Ohio State. Is that it?
Yep.
So when you were in college, you really didn't have much focus on wrestling at all. How many duels would you say you went to?
Oh man, while I was still in college, maybe 2. I think I went to watch Tommy Rollins maybe twice, just only because I remembered him from high school. He was a few years younger than me, so I think I might have went to 2 while I was in college. What's that?
He was incredible in high school, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, he was the man for sure.
So were you able to somewhat stay involved with the sport through your college career, and what made you get back into it? And I know we can talk about this afterwards, but what made you get back involved with the sport after college?
I mean, in college, I wasn't involved with it all. I mean, I did some, kind of off the record wrestling at like some frat parties and stuff like that. I mean, maybe wrestling in the bars or something, but no actual like real wrestling. I think that we might have went to some open tournaments or something, but I was kind of had drifted away from the sport, And you got to remember too, this was in the late 90s and early 2000s. There was no Google yet, and the internet was in its very early infancy. So not only was there no flow wrestling, but like if you wanted to learn about what was going on at the college level or in USA Wrestling, you had to go find a USA Wrestling magazine to buy, So there was really a disconnect. If you weren't still currently involved in a sport, you probably didn't really know what was going on about it or really care, because it's just not, the information wasn't at our fingertips, So I think, I didn't really get immersed back into it until I started training athletes, once I got my gym open.
So after you graduated from Ohio State, you got started in personal training, right? For
Yep.
friends. Can you just walk me through the insane story of getting old school gym started? This is probably gonna this is a long story, I know, but we're here for it.
All right, I'll try to give you like the 2-minute version of it. So my best friend Corey Gregory, we grew up lifting weights together, went to high school together, and that was kind of where we, just like you and Jude, kind of bonded over wrestling. Corey and I kind of bonded over weightlifting. And when I transferred to Ohio State my sophomore year of college, he ended up moving up here, moved in with me, and we had like a little weight room like in our crawl space, like in the townhouse we lived in, and that's where we would lift weights at. And we always said, like, man, it'd be awesome if we could own a gym someday and like get paid to do this. But it was just almost more like a joke, like us just kind of talking smack, like, because I didn't really think that we would ever actually get paid to lift weights. But he ended up, he went and got his 1-year degree and started working as a personal trainer at a gym kind of locally here in Columbus. I went and worked the desk there, just kind of had a desk job or whatever. And I mainly did that just so he and I could work out at that gym. But he got into a dispute with the management at one point, and he said, you know what? He said, I'm going to leave. I'm taking my clients with me, and I'm going to open my own training studio. And I remember thinking, he's nuts. We're like 19, 20 years old, and we don't know anything about Columbus. And, I'm like, you're going to open your own training studio? Like, how's that going to work, So we went and rented a little spot and, went and bought some equipment, like at yard sales and like secondhand stores and stuff like that. And it was a very, very, if you can see my patio behind me, I mean, the spot wasn't much bigger than this, So he opened it up. He really had a vision for it that was hard for me to see at the time, but I was like, all right, I'll start maybe try my hand at personal training. And by the time I ended up, kind of got close to graduation, at that point now I'd been working as a trainer, full time for a year or two, and I was starting to kind of see the possibilities. His business was continuing to grow. We were getting a little bit of name recognition just locally here in Columbus on the east side. And I thought, man, do I really want to go to grad school now and get my teaching certificate? I'm already doing actually what I like to do. I just never really thought it was an option to do that. So when I finished college, I was like, I'm just going to try the personal training for a year or two. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll go back into grad school and get my teaching certificate and go. But my first plan was to be an English teacher. And I think even at that time, I was thinking, well, I could still train clients in the evening and in the summertime and stuff like that and still be a teacher. And it was maybe 1 year after that. My wife and I, well, she was my girlfriend at the time, but we've been married now for a long time, but we ended up buying our first house, the house we still live in here. And it was out, just outside of Columbus in Patapsco, a little town right outside the outer belt. And about a month after I moved out here, there was a small little hole in the wall gym called Amazing Fitness. It was a total dump. It was this old building, just full of rusty weights. They ended up going out of business, and they reached out to Corey because they knew he had a training studio. And the guy had offered to sell us the business, and we kind of, borrowed money from our friends and whatever, our family and whatever, scraped the money together, whatever we had to do to buy this gym. And, at first, I can remember walking into the place, and it was like, the roof's leaking, it's small, it smells, the weights are all dirty. And we were thinking like, all right, we're going to have to try to clean this place up and try to make it nice and all this stuff. I thought, you know what? Like, people are either going to like this or they're not. Like, this is how I grew up lifting. Corey, this is how he grew up lifting. Like, I say we say we're old school. This is an old school gym, and it's about the effort that you put in here. It's not about the amenities. And if someone doesn't like it, then they're going to go lift somewhere else anyway. And that was how Old School Gym started in 2003. And we kind of outgrew that place after about 5 years and moved into our current building in 2008. And we've been going strong ever since.
So is that where the name Old School Gym came from?
That is exactly where it came from. Now, if Corey tells a story, he'll probably say that he's the one that came up with it, but I'm I'm willing to die on that hill that I was the one that said, hey, this is old school. We're just going to call it Old School Gym. But that was how it came together.
I love it, though. That's a great name for a gym. So when you started doing the personal training, like for the first time, did you feel anything like, this is for me, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, or did it take a while to kind of figure out that's what you wanted to do?
Well, it did take a little while, but just because I think I was in disbelief that it was even an option for me to make a career out of it. I do remember thinking, though, that like that first time someone paid me, I think at the time I charged $20 a session, I charge $100 a session now. So this was years ago, $20. And when they handed me that $20, I was kind of like in disbelief. Like, I can't believe someone's paying me $20 and I get to teach them to work out. Like, it almost seemed like too good to be true.
Yeah.
And, so I think I was really enchanted by that. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I was still thinking, all right, this probably isn't going to work. You're going to have to go back to school and be a teacher. And it took until like I really started getting momentum. And I think once we opened our gym together and left the training studio, that was when I really thought, all right, we can make this work. And there was no, just like I talked about with you guys, there was no playbook for you guys to follow for starting your own podcast. No one told you it was the perfect time. Same thing with us. It wasn't the perfect time to start a gym. We didn't have the perfect scenario, but we figured it out as we went. And, eventually we gained some momentum, and I started to realize, like, hey, people make things happen all the time, and so it's either going to be us or it's going to be someone else. Someone's either going to start the next big wrestling podcast or it's going to be you, right? You're the one that gets to dictate whether it's you or whether it's someone else. So I think once I started kind of thinking along those terms, and I really got to credit my partner, Corey G. He's really always been a kind of a visionary thinker in those ways that, he's always been able to see the big picture that a lot of times other people can't see. So.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. So the next topic I wanted to dive into is something that I've actually been talking with some of my coaches with recently.
Mm-hmm.
I've always struggled with, I know a guy like Kyle Dake. He went on Wrestling Changed My Life recently and talked about how he has journaled, I don't know, I think it was like 2,900 times. He was going to be a national champion in college. And I've always struggled thinking about my goals and stuff like that in that way. Writing down my goals, stuff like that, and understanding the reasoning behind it, because I've always been a student of and been taught that the focus is all on the process and on the journey. That's where that's what we should fall in love with. That's what our passion should be. And I feel like that's always been super result based. Is the reason I'm training is to the motivation for training is to get the results I want. And I've always struggled with that, but I've come to the realization a little bit that the goals aren't necessarily for training and wrestling in itself, but my passion is not diet. I do not really love dieting, and I don't love running and conditioning and stuff like that. That all comes into reaching that goal. And
Right.
so sometimes if you write down that goal and you have a choice between eating McDonald's or going home and making a healthy meal, if you think about that goal, you have a choice to make, and it's an easy choice. But for you, it's the opposite. Your passion has been the diet, the strength and conditioning, and stuff like that. Um, how do you feel like you've approached that and been able to, especially in the Ohio Regional Training Center, where you combat guys like Nathan Tomasello and Reese Humphrey, whose passions are wrestling and not so much the strength and diet and conditioning side?
Well, I think, number one, you brought up a lot of really good points, but I think
that was a lot to.
Yeah, that was a lot. I thought of a lot of things along the way, but you were on a flow right there. I didn't want to mess you up. That was really good. So, no, you had some excellent points, but I think the best advice I can give to someone is, all right, if your goal is X, and that, like, the training, the diet, the condition, whatever, it's part of it, and you have to do that to get to here, you need to quit looking at it as different things. They're all one and the same. Just like you said, the process is the goal is the process. It all has to be looked at as the same. And if writing your goals down is something that helps you, then you should do it. But I also don't think that just because Kyle Dake did it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be helpful for me or for someone else. Everyone has to kind of find, what their thing is that helps them focus. Some of the best advice I've ever heard is, or I wouldn't say it was advice, but it was kind of a talking point, was from Kyle Snyder, and this was years ago. And he said that, and I can't remember where he heard this or who asked him this or whatever, and they asked him what his goal was. And, his goal was to become an Olympic champion. I think this was before he had won the Olympics. And they said, okay, well, if you could not speak and someone could observe your actions for 24 hours, they saw everything you did, everything you ate, everything you did, would they be able to guess what your goal was? And when you start thinking that way, like, all right, everything I do needs to line up with my goals. There is no in season, off season. Well, this is training for my wrestling. I'm doing this for something else. It's all right. If this is my goal, then everything needs to align with it, because everything is going to either get you a little bit closer or get you a little bit further away. I always preach to my high school kids that all of our actions are like little sheets of paper. They're very thin. They stack up. It takes a long time before you get a big stack of paper, right? But what happens is those actions and those actions over time, they lead to something substantial. But at the same time, if you're constantly adding, taking away, by doing things that align with your actions, and then doing things that maybe are fine, but they don't align with your goals, you're going to have a hard time getting anywhere, and you just end up treading water. So for myself, it's kind of weird because I don't really compete in too much anything anymore. I boxed competitively before I had kids, and then I've done some triathlons and stuff like that. But the goal for my training is really not because I have, some, tangible achievement that I want to hit. My goal is I want to be the best version of myself. I want to inspire others. I want to be the guy that, when I'm 85 or 90 years old, I'm on the Today Show because I'm swimming across, Lake Erie or something like that. So I want to be that guy that inspires people, not just now, not just 10 years from now, but, for the rest of my life. So that's kind of really a driving force for me. So, it's easy for me to make choices about, what I should eat. And with training, I've done so much for so long. It's just such a part of who I am that if I wake up and if I don't train really hard twice in a day, I feel like I haven't done anything. There's like an emptiness inside. So I don't know whether that's, an obsessiveness. I don't know whether it's a sickness. I don't know what it is, but it's just the way that my brain's wired.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Building off of that, your experience with wrestling has grown from when you wrestled in high school, you went to college, you had a little bit of involvement. Obviously, when you're doing personal training, you don't have too much involvement. But what was it, 4 or 5 years you were with the Ohio State University as the strength and conditioning coach. And then you're on now as the Ohio Regional Training Center strength and conditioning coach. What has your experience been like with wrestlers that has maybe helped you, some things you've learned? And then what's it just been like for you to be back involved with wrestling itself?
Well, I started down at the RTC in 2012. And, before that, I trained Tommy Rollins at Old School Gym from 2010 to 2012. So that was kind of my introduction back into the wrestling world, or really into it, at a high level for the first time, was training Tommy Rollins.
How did you meet him and get into contact with
Yeah,
him?
so I met him in 2010 through a mutual business contact. And, I had known him from high school. We didn't really know each other, but I knew who he was, and I'd watched him wrestle a couple times because we were in school at Ohio State around the same time. And so I'd always kind of, looked up to him in that type of way. And we started talking, we just kind of hit it off on a personal note. And he said, hey, man, I had known the story. I knew that he had been, runner up at the trials in 2008. I kind of followed that loosely. But he said, hey, man, I'm getting ready to, I'm thinking about making a comeback, but I've been on the couch for 2 years. I haven't done anything. And he told me he was the type of guy that he, kind of like we talked about, he lifted weights and did conditioning because he had to for wrestling. He didn't love it. He didn't really understand much about it. He just did what his coaches told him to do. He'd never really developed that knowledge or that love for it, like some guys, like a Tomasello or a Snyder or a Colin Moore, guys like that. So he said, I kind of saw an opening, and I was just like, hey, man, well, let me help you, And he was like, well, all right. He said, I'll start coming out. So from 2010 to 2012, we kind of whipped Tommy back into shape. And, at the time, he was living in Hilliard, so he's driving 45 minutes each way to my gym. And I just looked at it as an awesome opportunity to work with such an elite athlete. And it was a real growing experience for me as a strength coach and as a trainer. So that was kind of how I got reintroduced there. And then, he made the finals of the trials again in 2012, lost to Jake Varner, so we're very close again, but
two-time
what's that?
Olympic runner-up.
Crazy. And Varner went on to win the gold in London. So kind of a crazy story, but
yeah, that's insane.
So he reached out to me though after the summer. Was like, hey man, you were a huge help. I was, I couldn't have been more physically prepared. I think we got some guys down here at the RTC that could use your help. Humphrey and Escobedo and these guys. He said, would you be interested in coming down? So I met Coach Lou and offered to come down and volunteer, and that's how I got my foot in the door. Me and Reese really hit it off at first, and kind of that was, even when I trained Tommy, I didn't really work. What's that?
Who doesn't hit it off with Reese?
Yeah, exactly, man. He's really the most likable guy. He's a real magnetic personality for sure. But and him and I were at a very similar stage in our lives. Our kids are the same age. At that time, we had two kids that were both very young. So, we were like young dads in the thick of things at the same time. And he and I had a lot of things in common. So, we started training, and with Tommy, I put him through the workouts. Reese was really the first guy at that level where I said, I'm not just going to put him through the workouts. I'm going to actually train with him, because I was like, this is a good opportunity for me to get in great shape, but also it's a way for me to challenge him and kind of get his respect. So me and Reese started training together. And that first, year and a half was basically just he and I training together down at the RTC. And every workout was like, we're going to see who the last man standing at the end is, who does not die from this workout, and, kind of skipping along a little bit, I kind of started getting that.
When he was really cutting a lot of weight.
What's that?
Was that around the time when he was cutting a bunch of weight to make 60 kilograms?
Yeah. So that's when Flo did the Flo special about him.
Yeah.
I think it was called The Weight, actually. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I think he made his first world team 2 years before I came down there. And then he made two world teams while I was training him. But, so we kind of fluctuated, they took out 60, so we had to go to 65, get bigger, so that was during all of that time. But also what coincided with that time was then I actually took over the role, through the RTC. I kind of gained the trust of Coach Ryan and the athletes. And I started actually training the whole team. So they used my role as the RTC strength coach as the de facto strength coach for OSU for about 4 or 5 years. Yeah, so I would say.
Did you get to work with other sports in that?
No, and I really had no desire to, because at this time I'm still, running my business, back here in Batascala. But, now when I go down to not now, obviously, with the night open, when I go down to the Jennings, I go down on Fridays. The other days, Nate, Miles, those guys will come out to Old School. But when I was training the team, I'd be down there for half a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, year round. So it was a huge time commitment. And I enjoyed every minute of it. But it's one of those things that was really hard to do with a family and kids, and also run another business on the side as well.
Yeah.
So
I bet that was crazy. When did you launch the whole supplement thing? Because that's like a whole nother business in and of itself. What is that? Is that Max Effort?
Yeah, Max Effort Muscle. So my partner Corey, who I'd mentioned, he had founded another supplement company back, I don't know, maybe 2006, 2007, around there, around the time we were opening the new Old School gym, and that was called Muscle Farm. They're still around. They were, what's that?
I said it's a good year. 2006 is a good year.
So yeah, you probably don't remember this, a little bit before your time, but Muscle Farm was a huge supplement company. He founded that. I mean, they did a deal with Arnold. They were one of the main UFC sponsors for a while. And then the company just kind of got too big and got out of control to where he didn't have any input and say. Like, this is what happens a lot of times in publicly traded companies. So he ended up walking away from the company maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And he said, hey, D, I got an idea for a company. We're going to do a supplement company. We're going to really be specifically for athletes. We're going to keep it small so we can have complete control over it. And, he's like, I want you to be the guy that really helps us, develop products and also training and stuff for the wrestling world and for fighters. And so it's Corey G, John Fosco, myself, Clay Guida, the UFC fighter, huge wrestling fan and wrestling coach at Montini Catholic, and then Travis Brown, another UFC fighter. So we're the guys that started the company. We've been in business for, I think, 4 years now. And it's been really cool.
Did you have to do a lot of were you really involved in diet and stuff like that and have a good knowledge of that before Max Effort, or did you have to really learn a bunch to develop products and stuff like that when you started Max Effort?
So with Max Effort, so I wasn't involved really on the actual product development side, other than saying like, okay, if we have a recovery drink, most recovery drinks might just have, branched chain aminos and glutamine. I would say, okay, well, my guys that are wrestlers that need to take this after wrestling practice, they're going to need electrolytes in there as well. Whereas normally most supplement companies might not think that because they're really just thinking about like bodybuilding and weightlifting, something like that. You might need your amino acids, but you don't necessarily need electrolytes. So I gave some input and stuff like that. And obviously just from training clients and everything for so long and working closely with Dr. Eric Serrano, one of my mentors, who's really world-renowned expert in the kind of fitness nutrition world. So I've really learned a lot over the years and, was able to give some good input, but I was not the one actually like formulating them, in the lab, that type of thing. So.
Yeah. So obviously when you started Old School Gym, Max Effort, all of your businesses, the world of marketing and social media and everything was nothing like it is now. As it's grown, what have you learned and been able to adapt to? What was your marketing strategy like when you started in 2006? And then what has it grown to now?
Well, we first opened the gym, the training studio in 2000 and then the Old School Gym in 2003. There was no social media. And, I think our first advertising we did, we used to it was just like throwing stuff at a wall and see what would stick. You would pay to like get your coupon in a little coupon book that would come in the mail every day and people look at it and just throw it away. So it was really hard. You had to make connections, locally in the community. But other than that, it was really hard to kind of get your message out there, Social media really changed that. It kind of allowed us to showcase the things we were doing. I always say, the stuff that we're doing at Old School Gym, we were doing 10 and 15 years ago, just nobody knew about it, But social media, especially Instagram, was really a big game changer for us, for be able to capture, what goes on at the gym. I was able to capture, all the stuff I did at the regional training center all those years, working with the athletes and stuff. That's really, recent, I think, not only workout wise, but like kind of like the physical challenges and tricks and stuff that we used to do that really helped our Instagram stuff grow. So to me, it was, I think, the biggest game changer ever for small business has been social media, without a doubt.
It's crazy. The first time I ever saw you or saw your name was on yours and Reese's crazy highlight Humphrey challenges, like those videos. That was the first time I ever saw you, was through those things. So the marketing that you're able to build through social media, and that's all that I do. Like, that's all that I have right now. And so everything that I do for marketing and trying to get my podcast out there is all based off of social media. We do really nothing else other than that. And so the worlds that we've grown up in and build different things in are completely different. And I think that's really cool how we have to adapt to different things. And sooner or later, I'm going to have to adapt away from what I'm used to right now, and stuff like that. I really think that's so cool.
Well, I think the great thing about, what you're doing or what I've been able to do through social media is I think that, people are drawn to authenticity. So if you are very authentic and passionate about, the sport and about what you love, that's going to come through in your content. It's going to come through in your marketing. It's going to come through in your podcast. People can tell if you're authentic about it or not. So I think it's the same thing, in my world with my gym, with my supplement company, with my training business. I always say, I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm just an ordinary guy that loves to train, loves to help people. And I think, I just have to continually show that, and people are drawn to it because there's so much smoke and mirrors out there on social media, especially in the fitness world. It's not as much of a problem in wrestling because it's a different dynamic, but in the fitness world, every guy that has abs or every girl that has a big butt, they think they're an Instagram star, and they put out this certain, front, and then they talk, they might they go on a rant about dedication. Then the next week it's a rant about, oh, I haven't worked out for 2 weeks because I did this. And, it just, there's all this back and forth. And it's like, I always say, you're either about it or you're not, right? You're either a wrestling nut, you're a wrestling fanatic to the core, or you're not. You're either someone who training is something you do, it's a non-negotiable, and it is what your life revolves around, or it's something you're trying to do for Instagram, So I think, for the most part, the people that will have the staying power in any industry, whether we're talking fitness, the podcasting world, whatever, why is Joe Rogan, so successful long term? It's because he's very authentic. You listen to Joe Rogan's podcast, and you hear exactly what is on his mind. He gives the same thing to everyone, and that's why there's staying power in there. So I think you're going to be all right, Sam. I think people are going to see that you're very very passionate about the sport.
I sure hope so. I think that's what I'm trying to get across to in the content that I produce and stuff like that. I really am passionate about it, and I hope that I can spread a little bit of that passion to who I talk to and who listens to the podcast.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know if you've thought about this angle, but I look at everything, through a business or entrepreneurship angle. I think more so than even spreading, your love of wrestling, I think you're going to inspire a new generation of, whether it's podcasters or YouTubers or everything. I think people are going to see what you're doing, what you've been able to do in such a short period of time. And it's going to encourage some kid somewhere that you've never met that maybe wrestles. So he's watched your podcast, say, you know what? Maybe I am going to start this business, or I am going to start, my blog, or whatever it is that they have an idea in their head. I think you're showing people that it's possible to do it. I think it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I kind of chase a little bit too. I love watching different people start, and that we can inspire different people to start things similar to what we're doing. We've had a few people follow our lead a little bit, and a couple of podcasts that have reached out to us, asked how to do it, that are kids and stuff. And that's really just so cool for me to watch that something that I'm doing is changing people and helping them to do things that they love and stuff like podcasts. It's really, really awesome.
That's the true definition in the realest terms of influencer. You're influencing people in a positive way to chase their dreams. It is a really cool thing.
Yeah. And I really love it. So that's something cool. But hey, we had a question from somebody, a listener, Scott Ross, wanted to ask you, who's the strongest pound for pound guy you've coached, wrestler you've coached?
Oh man, that's gonna be tough because I've coached some really strong guys. Pound for pound, I'm probably gonna have to say NATO. That's kind of the easy answer right there. I know.
He's so strong.
I don't know if you saw that video that was going around maybe a month or so ago when the guy deadlifted 1,100 pounds or whatever. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
It was the guy from Game of Thrones. It looks so easy, and it's super impressive. Don't get me wrong, but I did the math on it. The guy weighs like 440 or something, right? Yeah. So it was only like 2.5 times his body weight. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still impressive. I thought about, what? When NATO weighed 135 pounds, he deadlifted 455. That's over 3 times his body weight. So pound for pound, NATO was stronger than the strongest man on the planet, So I think, from a pound for pound aspect, it has to be NATO. I think when we're talking, especially if we're talking power wise, the most powerful athlete, and people kind of confuse strength and power and speed, but power is the ability to apply your strength explosively, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say the most powerful athlete has been Tayshian Campbell. Really? Incredibly strong too. Yeah.
He's so strong. Yeah. I remember watching him wrestle. Where is he now? Is he at Pitt?
He's at Kent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So he's
yeah,
not far
Kent,
from you
north.
guys.
About 2.5 hours actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of northeast Ohio, a little closer to Cleveland up that way. My sister's actually a professor at Kent, teaches up there. So,
Really? That's
but yeah,
pretty cool. He was so
yeah.
good.
So that man Shan's doing good. So I would say Shan's got to be, yeah, Shan, NATO. Those got to be the two most right there for sure.
Yeah, those guys make sense. Well, hey, that about wraps it up. Is there anything? How can people find you if they want to learn more about Max Effort or Old School Gym? If they wanted to sign up for any of your stuff.
Yeah, so the easiest way is just follow along on Instagram. I put daily workouts, tips, stuff like that. I put actually this, crazy bicep workout. I called it Death by Barbell Curl that myself and Caleb Romero and Colin Moore did today out at Old School Gym. So I posted that up today. I'm always trying to put unique stuff out there to help you guys. So just at Coach Myers _gut check. Look for my weekly strength tips on Flow. And that's really it, man.
Well, that's awesome. Is there anything else you want to say before we let you go here?
No, the biggest thing, I mean, any of you athletes that are still stuck at home training, I know some areas gyms are open. Some of you are able to go to your school and train, stuff like that. Some of you cannot. If you're still in a position where you have to train at home, I have a couple ebooks out specifically for wrestlers, how to train at home with minimal equipment using household items. And it's not just, hey, do 500 push-ups a day. Hey, do 500 squats a day. No, it's actual taking time under tension methods that will really still help you develop strength. Lots of good variety. It's called Strength Conditioning for Wrestling, Home Workout Edition, Volume 1, Volume 2. And you can get to those through my Instagram as well.
That's awesome. Then there's your English major at work, isn't
it? After all these years, I'm actually using my degree, but to talk about my real passion, training wrestlers.
Yeah. It was funny when you were talking about it. I was thinking the world would be missing out on a lot if Dustin Myers ended up being an English teacher. But those English students would love it, I'm sure. That'd probably be the most fit English class there is.
Yeah, it's funny to see how and with you being young, you haven't really reached any of these crossroads yet. But as you get older, you come to certain crossroads, and at the time, things that kind of seem inconsequential, they really alter the entire path of your life. And yeah, there's really no way to know what it'd be like if I would have been an English teacher. Who knows? I definitely wouldn't be sitting here talking to you about wrestling, though. I know that. So yeah. I'm thankful that I chose the path I did, and I'm thankful that you and I have been able to cross paths as well.
Yeah, that is really awesome. But hey, we're winding down here. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and talk some wrestling, tell about your story. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. I really appreciate it as well. It was good catching up with you. And just so you know, I'm always in your corner, man. Anything you need, just hit me up. All right.
I sure will. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
You as well.